Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gersh1, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Spacemarines as we get into the horrible realities of the life of an Astartes. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And of course, if you have any suggestions, just comment down below. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the horrible realities of the Spacemarine life. To be an Adeptus Astartes is to be seen as an angel of the God Emperor made flesh. Every Space Marine exudes awe and fear, whether stomping through battlefields or the Imperial Palace. But behind the ornate power armor and the honorable heraldry lies a sinister truth, one of brutal sacrifice and appalling reality. These are known as the horrible realities of a Space Marine's life. The sorrow of a Space Marine doesn't begin during his induction into his chapter, or even before the minuscule spark of his potential greatness is seen by an Astartes chaplain. It begins long before, when a child is pushed down an unfortunate path completely out of his control that will eventually mold him to be a prime recruit for the greatest of the Emperor of Mankind's warriors. Every Space Marine has a brutal past of abuse, long before they become demigods in the eyes of mortal men. A chaplain handpicks his recruits, all of which are adolescents or very young adults, oftentimes as young as 10 years old. But even by this tender age, these recruits display a natural psychotic killer instinct. Varied are the horrible experiences that must befall a 10-year-old boy to cause him to lack basic empathy and instead nurture an instinct for savagery. But the sad reality is that to be a Space Marine is to have suffered since birth. The most common planets Space Marines collect recruits from are feral worlds. These are planets where danger is found around every corner. The harsh environment of the world has made it impossible for a human population to evolve past a tribe or nomadic state. The ancient settlers of these worlds were shunned from communication to the wider Imperium due to environmental abnormalities, be they warp-driven or biological, and so they are devoid of the technologically sophisticated gifts of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The children that come from these worlds have lived through experiences that would be considered nightmares to a common Imperial citizen. To be born on this type of planet is to be guaranteed a life devoid of peace and happiness. They are raised in a world filled with predators. They have seen beasts that tower over humans and have the power to snap a full-grown man in two with a simple flick of the wrist. They have traveled through waters filled with unknown creatures that lurk in shadowy depths. They have experienced the dread of watching their tribesmen drowned by these sea monsters, then leaving the dead bodies to float on the water surface. These children come from worlds where more often than not, they are the hunted, where giant airborne creatures swoop down and pick them off, like hawks preying on mice, or where feline creatures sit and wait to ambush unaware travelers. These children have seen the horrible ways the galaxy has mutated the human form, grotesque abnormalities driving whole tribes insane and pushing them down the path to savagery to the point where they are robbed of their humanity. Even the plants and animals they rely on these worlds can turn on their caretakers in the blink of an eye. One minute a child is watering his garden, the next, the vines of the plants are wrapping tighter around the child's neck. The harsh reality of the environment often spreads into the tribes of humans that populate the planet. Tribes go to war for the little resources the planet offers them. Humans kill humans as a means of survival. Children live through the murder of their parents as they are taken by one of these horrible realities that a feral world has in store. That is, of course, if the boy is not born an orphan. On other recruitment worlds, the quality of life of a future Astartes is no better. Hive worlds are often perfect cultivators of truly psychotic killers, for in these cramped and filthy cities, hive gangs flourish, and the strong prey on the weak. For those unfortunate souls, hive cities are where children are bartered and sold to become workers of manufactorums or foot soldiers of hive gangs. Sometimes babies are ripped from their mother's arms and become payments for long-standing debts. Potential Space Marines begin their path to their chapter without even knowing, as hive gangs mold their abducted children into killing machines. As soon as they are old enough to hold a las pistol, these children are sent into rival gang territory to shoot indiscriminately and deliver a brutal message on behalf of their gang lords. They are injected with chemicals to increase their aggression and at the same time take their mind off the pain and regret they feel for the actions they commit. Dependence on these drugs grow as the years go by, until they cannot get out of bed without an injection of some stimulant. And of course, foot soldiers need to be replenished, and at the cost of mental scarring, the children must induct new recruits and force them through the same abuse that was placed on them only a few years ago. In the end, to be chosen by a chaplain of the Adeptus Astartes indicates a horrible upbringing. The few Space Marine chapters that do not recruit from these agonizing worlds will take their neophytes from honorable warrior conclaves or from highborn society. But to these future recruits, the pain and suffering has only been delayed, for even these recruits will experience the dread of the aspirant trials and the indoctrination process that all Battle Brothers must go through. Once selected as an aspirant, the 10-year-old starts his trial. The trials vary from chapter to chapter, but all these traditional feats of strength are designed to weed out the aspirant who is too weak for the future that awaits him. In most chapters, the aspirants must fight each other. Sometimes the children will be given melee weapons like swords, clubs, or spears. Sometimes they will be given nothing at all and are left to fight each other with their fists. The one common feature of these blood duel trials is that they end in death. The aspirant fights round after round, only progressing until their opponent is laying lifeless on the floor. The chapters expect their aspirants to hunt down the same creatures that plague their past. Predatory creatures from Pharaoh worlds, lethal Dark Eldar, and even barbarous green-skinned orcs are all creatures that an aspirant must track down and kill. All these aspirant trials have one expected outcome: the death of the majority of aspirants. Those few that remain will continue down the painful path into the indoctrination process. To become a Space Marine, the aspirant must be implanted with the gene seed organs that will turn him into an Astartes. A painful and agonizing process that will last almost 8 years. The neophyte will go through incredible biological changes that will bring unfathomable pain. While his body is going through these numerous cycles of breaking and healing, the neophyte's mind will be probed by his Space Marine masters. Their deepest, darkest memories will be taken and played on repeat, purposefully made to seem never-ending in the hopes of breaking the mind. The day the child watched his mother die, the day his body was severely burned, the day he first witnessed the horrors of the warp. Probes will search every corner of the mind in the hopes of finding these memories to best test the child. If no memory is sufficient enough in the eyes of an Astartes, a fake memory will be created, one that will not be distinguishable as false, all in the hopes of testing the mind and guaranteed it's not found wanting. At this point on the path of becoming an Astartes, most neophytes will go insane, driven mad by the constant picking and poking of their minds. The majority that succumb to the madness will be lobotomized and turned into chapter servitors. A sad outcome to a child warrior that has gone through so much. For all those that survive the grueling 8 years awaits a sinister reality, because after the psychological and the physical testing, the person that existed before is gone. Each Astartes is stripped of his past, his name long erased from the memories of the demigod that stands before his chapter. In many ways, the process of becoming an Astartes kills the person that was there before. Recollection of his life before becoming a Space Marine is almost impossible, and for an Astartes to even take the time to try to remember his past would be pointless to the stoic warrior of the Emperor. One can even agree that the whole ordeal is the chapter's way of stealing children, brainwashing neophytes, and implanting transhumans with new identities, ones that are easily controlled and directed to perform the Imperium's bidding. When stripped of the power, the ceremony, and the authority, there is very little that sets a Space Marine recruitment apart from the recruitment of a hive gang. The end result is the same: an abiding servant capable of killing at a simple command. Once a full-fledged battle brother, the life of a Space Marine is most often a regimented ritual, a cycle of prayer, training, eating, and sleeping. The praying is done multiple times a day, and at least once, in front of a chapter's chaplain. This ceremony is spoken of as venerating, but the truth is that it is a re-indoctrination process, made to remind the Marine that his life is not his own, but it belongs to the God Emperor and nothing else. Most aspects of the mind of a Space Marine are dulled to accept this lifestyle, only broken free when asked to murder in the name of the Emperor. But even then, the actions of a Space Marine are not coming from his own will, but rather the will of the Emperor or the indoctrination process. The strength and glory of becoming a demigod comes at a price, and that price is individual freedom. When out of the fortification of a fortress monastery and exposed to the myriad threats that exist in the galaxy, a Space Marine will inevitably be confronted with a sad reality. This reality will be made clear upon the first encounter with Homo sapiens, the sad, defenseless creature he once was and must now fight to protect. Most Space Marines will find the average military commander or High Lord an annoyance to speak to. Their primitive grasp on reality, compared to the advanced military Astarte mind, is equivalent to a human watching a mouse run a maze. The constant bickering and lack of resolve is the true reason most Space Marines choose to fight on their own terms. The worst part is the reality that a Space Marine dies for this primitive creature. A Space Marine is forced to sacrifice everything in an effort to allow the weak and senseless Imperium of man to prosper. Space Marines must live with the knowledge of the disapproval the Emperor himself would have of humans worshipping him as a god. The Imperial truth outlawed his worship, and yet entire planetary sectors erect cathedral after cathedral. Silently, the Astarte is forced to stand vigil over a population that has strayed from the Emperor's true teachings and continues to bastardize the work of the Great Crusade with corruption and petty infighting. And while most of the Space Marines that have come before have been able to find comfort in the knowledge that they alone stand above all of the defenders of the Imperium of man, that position is short-lived with the introduction of the Primaris Marines, Astartes, loyal to the Imperium even through the defamation of the Emperor's teachings, raised with the belief that they have been gifted the holy gene seed of the Primarchs themselves, are now pushed aside by a stronger and more revered class of warrior. The psychological trauma that must befall a Space Marine who will be outclassed in every aspect of war is incredibly profound. Space Marines of old become a shadow to their superior brethren and their Primaris gene seed. And those were 40 facts on the horrible realities of the Space Marine life. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it tore down a lot of the glorified hype of a Space Marine. I know when we go into the battlefield and we fight with these shiny armored superhumans, it's nice, but the reality, the sad reality is that they are child soldiers. And I hope that brings the Warhammer 40K universe deeper down into the grim dark hole that it is, because I just find that whole theme really, really good, and Space Marines are one of the aspects of that grim darkness, the reality that they are child soldiers. Now, I grew up around the time of the Invisible Children's Project, or non-for-profit organization thing. If you don't know, here in America, for a while, I think it was like late 2000s, there was an organization called Invisible Children's, and they basically just went high school to high school trying to raise money to help children in Africa, because in Africa, specifically in Uganda, warlords, political parties were using child soldiers to fight their wars. So these warlords were going into tribes, towns, cities, killing everybody, taking the children, who sometimes were like, you know, as young as 5 or 10, and forcing them to fight in their wars. Sometimes going as far as like making the children kill each other, making the children kill their family so that they had no ties. And this is all like horrible things that actually happen here in the real world. So we were told that in high school, and it reminded me, well, we watched a lot of movies and whatnot, and and like the whole story reminded me of the story of the Space Marines and how Space Marines come from these types of worlds where a young or a recruit of a Space Marine is psychotic and he's a killer. So for a lot of people it's difficult to understand that, but for me, growing up and being introduced to the whole Invisible Children's Project and seeing that yes, this is a reality that's happening in our world, it made it easier to connect or easier to sympathize with a Space Marine's life, because it is something that's happening, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's where I got a lot of the inspiration to this lore. I really wanted to focus on the beginnings of a Space Marine, because the beginnings of a Space Marine are really sad and grim and horrible. If you guys go onto Netflix, or if you have Netflix, there's a movie called Beasts of No Nation, and it basically goes through the whole thing that I said. They're children who are raised as soldiers, and if you want to kind of get a glimpse at what the life of an early Space Marine would be, check out that movie on Netflix. It's called Beasts of No Nation. It's sad, but it's something that probably compares to the life of a neophyte, or the life of an aspirant. It made it easy for me to realize that, in the far future of the Grimdark universe, this is something that would continue. Very soon, I'm going to be posting another video called The Horrible Realities of a Space Marine. It's going to be different than this video. This video really focuses on the individual Space Marine and us looking into the Space Marine's life, whereas the Horrible Realities of a Space Marine will be looking out. So we'll be looking at the Adeptus Astartes organization and its influence, its horrible influence on the Imperium and at the galaxy as a whole. This is a viewer request. You guys have been requesting that for quite a bit now, and I wanted to put this video out first because, of course, I was more inspired to create this video than the other one. But the other one is going to be a lot better because I created this first, because this video gave me a lot of inspiration for the Horrible Realities of a Space Marine. So it's coming very soon. So stay tight, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you guys like these types of videos, the horrible reality videos, there's a whole playlist on our channel for them. And help us out a little bit by supporting us on Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create the Horrible Reality series and the daily life series, all those types of unique videos. It really helps us out if you support us on Patreon. If you can't, we understand. Simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it really helps out. So by you sharing this video on Facebook or Twitter, it helps us out. But with that said, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.